Go to Geneva now and bringing Ali Vaez, who's the director of the Iran project and a senior advisor at the International Crisis Group. And obviously we're there in Geneva for the talks that have just taken place. And you probably know all about this. The information that we've been getting is these talks were indirect. So you had representatives from Iran and the US meeting separately with Omani mediators, and they passed on that relevant information. I mean, I'll be honest, to an outsider, that might seem a bit childish. Why is it so bad that they can't even sit together in the same room?
It is childish, and it is the most ineffective way of conducting negotiations. But the Iranians believe that direct negotiations could only happen if there is not a gun held to their head during the negotiations. And of course, President Trump has often seen military pressure as useful for extracting concessions, and that's why in his first term in office and in his second term in office, the Iranians have so far been reluctant to engage directly.
Here's another point of view, which, you know, some might not agree with, but some people say this isn't a negotiation, it's just an ultimatum from the United States. How would you interpret that? I mean, is the US willing to compromise? And if it is, what areas would it compromise on?
Look, it is too soon to judge. It does appear that both sides are at least agreeing on the scope of the negotiations, on what should be on the table or what should be the focus. It's still unclear whether nuclear would be first and then non-nuclear issues like Iran's missile program or Iran's regional activities would be discussed later. Or maybe on nuclear, they would have more detailed technical conversations and some sort of a give and take. Whereas on non-nuclear issues, it will be more superficial and more of understandings or a set of principles rather than any serious give and takes. We'll have to see, but the reality is that the Trump administration, if it wants a deal, it has to step aside from maximalism of expecting Iran completely surrender to its terms, and it also has to consider granting sanctions relief to the Iranian regime, which is very difficult to do, given the fact that this is a regime which just committed massacre of several thousand of his own people. So politically, for President Trump, this would be very hard to do.
America's got warships anchored off the Iranian coast, and we've heard from our correspondent in Tehran. He says, you know, this is instilling fear into the public in the country. And yet we have these, what seem to be very slow moving talks, meandering. They're not even in the same room yet. I mean, is it possible that the warships are just a bluff from President Trump?
Look, everything is possible with President Trump. He's notoriously unpredictable. The reality, but you're right, is that the pace of military mobilization is much higher than the pace of diplomacy. And this is why if the parties want to avert a war, which will be costly for both sides, there is no easy win and clean victory for either side in a conflict, then they would have to soften their red lines. They would have to take this more seriously. It took 2.5 years of very rigorous, serious negotiations to reach the 2015 nuclear deal. You can't do a deal with in and out, an hour and 2 hour long meetings every 2 weeks. It just doesn't work that way. These are extremely complex and technical issues. It would require patience and flexibility on both sides. And for now, there is no sign of it.
Ali, great to speak to you. Thanks so much for coming on to TRT World. Ali Vaez is a senior advisor at the International Crisis Group.